Good morning, students. We hope you all are keeping well. By now you have become an active part of our online program, and we are glad to see wholehearted participation and great enthusiasm from your side. We hope you would continue with the same. Today in this video I am going to start with the chapter Discovering Tut, the Saga Continues from the book Hornbill. So let's start with that. Chapter 3, Discovering Tut, the Saga Continues from the book Hornbill. The chapter is a little related to the mummification process in the ancient Egypt. So before starting with the chapter, it's important to know what was the process of mummification in the ancient Egypt and why did Egyptians mummify people.
This is a mummy of a young man named Heraclides. He died in Egypt in the 1st century AD when he was about 20 years old. Mummification was developed by the ancient Egyptians to preserve the body for the afterlife. Typically, all internal organs were removed before mummification, with the exception of the heart. But in this case, the heart was removed and the lungs were left intact. Next, the body was covered with salt and left for about 40 days, until all moisture was eliminated. Perfumed oils and plant resins were rubbed on the body. Thick layers of resin were applied to glue the strips of linen that were wrapped around the body. The mummy was placed on a wooden board, and more wrappings bound them together. A mysterious pouch, perhaps of religious significance, was placed on the chest. A mummified ibis, a wading bird with a slender, down-curved bill, was placed on the abdomen. Ibis mummies commonly served as votive offerings to the gods, but this is an unusual case of a bird being mummified with a deceased human. Long linen strips further secured the wrappings. A portrait panel of Heraclides was placed over the face. A large linen cloth was wrapped around the mummy. The shroud was painted red with an imported lead-based pigment. This treatment is rare. Very few red shroud mummies are known to exist. Egyptian symbols of protection and rebirth were painted on the outer cloth with pigments and gold. Finally, Heraclides' name was written in Greek at the feet. Thanks to this remarkable mummification process, Heraclides' body is with us today.
The mummification of the pharaohs.
It just allows us to look into their faces and see them as the same kind of individuals as you or I. We can really try and tap into what made the ancient Egyptians tick.
The human body starts to decompose around 4 minutes after death. So how did the Egyptians manage to preserve them for more than 3,000 years? In all the hieroglyphs and scripts of ancient Egypt, there is no written formula for mummification. Its techniques must have been passed down by word of mouth alone. Mummification was secret because the well-being of Egypt depended on it. It meant that even after death, the pharaoh could protect the nation.
The death of any pharaoh was a crisis point for the ancient Egyptians, and it was essential that each deceased pharaoh be transformed into a mummy to create basically a permanent home for the soul.
The mummified pharaoh's soul recognized his body and could dwell there forever.
If the divine royal soul could last forever, so could Egypt. It was a kind of guarantee that each one would last for eternity.
It is very much clear from the title Discovering Tut, that we are going to study about King Tut. So let's know about who was he.
The boy king Tutankhamun is perhaps the most recognizable Egyptian ruler of all time, though he only ruled Egypt for 10 years.
He's famous because by chance we have an intact tomb of a pharaoh. And even though it's a minor one, it gives us a glimpse into the real splendor and wealth of ancient Egypt.
Born Tutankhaten around 1341 BC, it is believed that his father was King Akhenaten.
His mother is still unknown because the DNA testing doesn't allow you to differentiate between a bunch of different sisters. The Egyptians made things very tough on historians by a lot of times marrying their siblings.
Tutankhaten assumed the throne at 9 years old.
Try to imagine a fourth grader as mayor of your town. The chances of a child running the country are really slim or non-existent. Other people were calling the shots.
Akhenaten had taken the country through a religious change, and Tut spent most of his reign revoking his father's religious reforms, even changing his name from Tutankhaten to Tutankhamun.
I think what you could say King Tut's most important act was more as a tool for powerful interests who wanted to overturn much of what his father did. To try to overturn the dictates of a former pharaoh, the best tool in your arsenal is to have the new pharaoh to do that with.
After 10 short years as pharaoh, Tutankhamun died at the age of 19.
No one knows what killed King Tut, and he died as a relatively young man, but there were a lot of things in the ancient world that could cause your death. He was infected with malaria, DNA testing shows. He had a lot of bones that had been broken, including some relatively close to the time he died. Infection is not unheard of. Assassination is not unheard of.
Tutankhamun was largely forgotten until 1922, when archaeologist Howard Carter found his tomb.
He suddenly went from being an absolute unknown to being perhaps the best known, all because of this discovery that took everyone by surprise. Such fabulous wealth. Nothing like that had been discovered before, and nothing really since.
From the video you have got to know about Tutankhamun's life. Tutankhamun, or better known as King Tut, was a pharaoh. Pharaoh, do you understand? A ruler in ancient Egypt is known as pharaoh, who accomplished little in his life. He did not expand Egypt's borders nor enjoy triumphant victories like the many pharaohs before him. However, he is the most recognized and probably the most famous pharaoh today. You know why he was so famous? Because the two biggest questions that still linger about Tut are how did he die and how old was he at the time of his death. There is mystery behind that. And this curiosity led Howard Carter to discover King Tut's almost intact tomb in the Valley of the Kings. The tomb was important because it let archaeologists record what an Egyptian king's tomb looked like and learn more about ancient Egypt. Have you ever observed whenever we get incomplete information, we try to complete that? Do you know what is that? That is human curiosity, the man's quest to unravel the mysteries of the past. And it is an ongoing process. With the forensic analysis of the King Tut's body, a new saga has been initiated. Efforts are on to scan more such bodies which lie preserved in the ancient Egyptian cemetery known as the Valley of the Kings. The scanning of the King Tut's body was just the beginning. The saga continues. His mystery continues to interest mankind even now. Let's get an overview of the chapter and gather some information about the author, A.R. Williams.
Discovering Tut, the Saga Continues, A.R. Williams. In this module, you will get an overview of the account Discovering Tut, the Saga Continues, and also gather some information about its author, A.R. Williams. An overview. This is an account of the discovery of King Tut's tomb in 2005 using modern technology. Tut, the teenage king and the last heir of a powerful Egyptian dynasty, had an untimely death, and there have been many speculations about its cause. After years of futile searches, Howard Carter, a British archaeologist, discovered Tut's tomb in 1922, and for the first time in history, documented the treasures that lay buried with the king. The Secretary General of Egypt's Supreme Court of Antiquities, Zahi Hawass, informed that Tut's mummy was in a very bad shape due to Carter's act of discovery. This was because the ritual resins used to mummify the body had cemented it to the coffin. Therefore, Carter's men had to cut the mummy from under the limbs and trunk in order to lift it out. Later, on January 5, 2002, under Zahi Hawass's supervision, Tut's mummy was scanned using a CT scan machine and then carried back to his tomb. The royal mummy underwent a CT scan. Hundreds of tourists from the world over flocked to the rock-cut tomb and paid respect to the boy pharaoh. The CT scan revealed images of the mummy's head, hand, and ribcage. Hawass was relieved to see that Carter's examinations had not caused much harm to the mummy. About the author. A.R. Williams is a senior writer in National Geographic magazine. This is an extract from one of her articles that featured in National Geographic, Volume 207, Number 6. Some of her popular works include Bamboo Clothing and Mystery of the Tattooed Mummy.
Let's go through the explanation of the chapter line by line. Explanation of the first paragraph. Tutankhamun, also known as Tut, was a teenager when he died. He was the last successor of his powerful pharaoh dynasty, which ruled Egypt and its empire for centuries. He was laid on rest, heavily loaded with gold. His tomb was discovered in 1922, which made the world raise a question about what had happened to him and whether he had been murdered. After almost 80 years, his body was about to undergo a CT scan. It was scanned to get new information and clues about his life and death. As murder being the most extreme possibility, scientific tests and techniques used in connection with the detection of crime. And this whole process is called forensic reconstruction. Let's move to second paragraph now. A fast, strange and unnatural wind was blowing as King Tut's body was taken from his grave called Valley of the Kings, an ancient Egyptian cemetery. Dark clouds moved quickly across the desert all day long and later. They covered the stars. On January 5, 2005 at 6 p.m., King Tut's mummy, which is the world's most famous mummy, was placed in the CT scanner to investigate the mystery behind his death, which had occurred more than 3,300 years ago. Ever since King Tutankhamun's tomb was discovered in Egypt's Valley of the Kings, stories circulated that those who dared violate the boy king's final resting place faced a terrible curse. All afternoon, tourists visited the 26 feet deep underground rock-cut tomb to pay respect to the king. Many people stuffed into the small tomb and looked in admiration at the murals on the walls of the chamber, and took a look at the face of Tut that had been painted with gold. While visitors read the guidebooks in a hushed tone, some stood silently, wondering about his untimely death in his teen years. They might also be wondering if the curse of the pharaoh, which leads to the descent of misfortune upon the person who disturbs him, is true or not. Moving further, as Zahi Hawass, Secretary General of Egypt, leaned over the body to have a look, he said that the mummy was in a very bad condition because of what the British archaeologist Howard Carter did to it. In the 1920s, he discovered King Tut's tomb in 1922 after a long research. The valuable treasure of Tut had been explored earlier too, but surprisingly, they were complete. The treasure found at Tut's grave is the richest till date and has come to be known as Pharaoh's legend. It has artifacts in gold which are eternally beautiful and as good as new. Such artifacts still get attention. Tut was buried with things of daily use like a razor made of bronze, games, linen undergarments, boxes of food and wine, which he could use in the next life. The ancient Egyptians attitude towards death was influenced by their belief in immortality and afterlife. They regarded death as a temporary interruption rather than the end of their life. When they died, they were mummified so the soul would return to the body, giving it breath and life. Carter took a few months to record the treasure found in Tut's grave. Then he began investigating his 3 coffins, which were nested one in another. In the first coffin, he found a piece of cloth with garlands of willow, olive leaves, wild celery, lotus petals, and cornflower, which suggested that he had been buried in the months of March or April. When he reached the third coffin, he was in trouble. The body had hardened due to the raisins which had cemented the body, and it had stuck to the bottom of the coffin, which was made of gold. Carter wondered what to do next because no amount of force could separate the two. Carter took a few months to record the treasure found in Tut's grave. Then he began investigating his 3 coffins, which were nested one in another. In the first coffin, he found a piece of cloth with garlands of willow, olive leaves, wild celery, lotus petals, and cornflower, which suggested that he had been buried in the months of March or April. When he reached the third coffin, he was in trouble. The body had hardened due to the raisins which had cemented the body, and it had stuck to the bottom of the coffin, which was made of gold. Carter wondered what to do next because no amount of force could separate the two. The sun can beat down like a hammer this far south in Egypt, and Carter tried to use it to loosen the raisins. For several hours, he set the mummy outside in blazing sunshine that heated it to 149 degrees Fahrenheit. But nothing budged. He reported with scientific detachment that the consolidated material had to be chiseled away from beneath the limbs and trunk before it was possible to raise the king's remains. Carter tried to loosen the raisins by keeping the body in the hot sun. He kept the mummy in 149 degrees Fahrenheit heat for several hours, but still it remained stuck. He reported that a chisel could be used to cut down the mummy from the limbs and the trunk, so that Tut's body could be taken out of the coffin. According to Carter, he had no choice other than to cut the mummy. He believed that if he hadn't done that, thieves would have removed the gold from the tomb and would have looted it. During Tut's time, the royal people were very wealthy, and they had a belief that after that they could take the wealth along with them. For his life after that, he was given precious collars, necklaces with decorative patterns, bracelets, rings, amulets, sandals, sheaths for fingers and toes, and now an iconic inner coffin and a mask. His men removed his head and every joint of his body. After they finished, they reassembled the remains in a wooden box with padding filled with a layer of sand to conceal the damage. It was his new resting place. In the past few decades, archaeology has changed, as it now focuses on the details of life and the mysteries of death. Earlier, it was about focusing on the treasure. Now it uses more advanced medical technologies and tools for research. In 1968, an anatomy professor x-rayed King Tut's mummy and revealed that the front limbs and the breastbone were missing. Now, with the advancement of technology, CT scan or computer tomography can give a virtual image of the whole body. With the help of this technology, King Tut's body scanned to find answers of 2 questions: how he died and how old he was at the time of his death. His death was a shock to the royals also, as he was the last person of his family, and his funeral indicated the diminishment of his dynasty. However, what happened to after his death is still not clear. Tut's father or grandfather, Amenhotep III, was a powerful pharaoh who ruled over a period of 40 years. His son, Amenhotep IV, succeeded him and began the strangest period in the history of Egypt. He promoted the worship of Aten. He changed his name to Akhenaten, meaning servant of Athens. He also shifted the religious capital from Thebes to the new city of Akhenaten called Amarna. Further, he attacked the god Amun, smashed his images, and closed his temples. Ray Johnson, director of the University of Chicago, said it must have been a bad time for the empire, as the family who ruled over for centuries came to an end, and Akhenaten moved in an odd direction. Another mysterious ruler, Semenkhare, succeeded him and died soon. Next, Tutankhamun, also known as Tut, sat on the throne and ruled for 9 years. He worshipped god Amun in the old ways. However, he died mysteriously. Until now, with the help of the Egyptian Mummy Project, which started in 2003, almost 600 mummies have been recorded so far. King Tut's mummy was the first one to be scanned by CT. The CT scan machine scanned the body by creating 1700 digital X-rays in cross-sections. Tut's head was scanned in 0.62 mm slices to record the tiny details. The resulting image was very strange. A team of radiology, forensics, and anatomy experts started examining the secrets of the grave that had been protected by flying goddess for a long time. During the night, workmen climbed up on the ramp and the flights of stairs to carry the body from the tomb into the spinning sand outside. They rose the body onto a hydraulic lift, then into a trailer where the scanner was kept. After 20 minutes, 2 men ran towards the office nearby to bring 2 fans. The scanner was not working as the sand had entered a cooler fan. The guard joked that it was because of the curse of the pharaoh because they had removed his body. Once the fans worked, the procedure was finished. The data was checked in case of any losses, and then technicians returned the body to the pall bearers who carried him back to his tomb. In less than 3 hours, he was resting at the same place where the priests had laid him many years ago. In the trailer, the technician showed a beautiful image of Tut on a computer screen. He showed the grey head which was scattered in pixels, and he spun it around. Next, the vertebral hand, ribcage, and transection of his skull was shown. As the work was done, the pressure was finally off from the shoulders of Zai Hawass. While sitting in his chair, he smiled and said that he was relieved that nothing went wrong. He had not slept the previous night, and now, as the work was done, he would go and sleep. By the time they left the trailer, the wind had stopped and the winter air was like death itself. Just above the tomb, the Orion constellation shone in the night sky, watching over the boy king. Now let's have a look of King Tut's tomb.
Given that he's so globally famous now, we actually know remarkably little about Tut's life. And that's partly because his reign was cut short when he was around about the age of 19. But it's his cause of death that's become one of Egypt's most enduring mysteries. To see why his death is such a mystery, I'm heading for his tomb with Egyptologist Gail Gibson. They would have had to dig all this out.
Every bit of it, wondering every minute what was at the end.
From the moment Howard Carter entered this place, there were signs that there was something strange about Tut's death.
Why give him this?
For a start, when compared to the other tombs in the valley, this one was a lot smaller. It is surprisingly small.
It's not at all what you'd expect for a royal tomb.
No.
It is very strange, this very bare and small tomb. This was the room with the chariots and beds and boxes and all kinds of stuff.
This modest tomb was jammed full of all the royal possessions that were usually buried with a king.
It can't have been meant to be all jumbled up like that. People are just trying to cram as much stuff as possible into this small space. Shall we go down?
Yeah, let's... I can't believe we're going to do this. Another unusual thing is the decoration, or rather, lack of it. Other royal tombs are adorned in hundreds of intricate portraits of the pharaohs and the gods. By comparison, this one just doesn't look very royal. And the paintings here are interesting. Everything is on a very large scale.
Very mysterious. These are odd paintings for a king.
And lastly, on top of the paintings, something that's only recently been identified. 3,000-year-old mould.
It looks like these paintings were done on wet plaster very fast, painted on, and then bang, bringing everything close up the tomb very quickly. But this is still wet, and so the mold has a chance to grow, even though there's nobody here for the next 3,000 years.
So it kind of does suggest a hurried burial, perhaps. You know, caution, wet paint, never mind, we'll just seal it up anyway.
I think that's one of the best bits of evidence that it's a rush burial.
As the detailed explanation of the chapter is given, I hope you would have understood. Each paragraph consists of important questions, which I have marked with black color and also highlighted them in headings. Please go through those and read them in detail to get good marks in exams. Please read the chapter again, revise all the questions. Till then, take care of yourself, stay home, stay safe, keep learning and keep motivating us.